Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how I turn out and present my working hunters for the show ring. The first thing I'm going to talk about is clipping. Now a lot of people say not to clip their summer coats because it ruins them, however I don't find that to be the case. I actually find by clipping the horses it makes them look a lot smarter. I don't clip all of my horses, but horses that have a longer summer coat or tend to get hot, they get clipped. So Alf, for instance, has he has a funny coat. Being coloured, his brown is quite flat and fine. However, the white bit is quite thick and he gets quite hot. And I don't know why that is, but I think it's quite common in coloured horses. So anyway, he gets clipped completely out. The only thing I leave in is his saddle patch. So if you come and have a look, he was last clipped 3 weeks ago, I think, and you can still see, like, look how much of a mark that's left. His coat is like really thick for a summer coat, and like I say, he gets quite hot. And this here probably doesn't look too bad, but if you look at his legs, like, they're very thick. So I clip them out, and he just looks a lot smarter. The only thing I would say is that he does lose his colour slightly, so his natural summer coat is quite a rich red. However, he turns to more like a pale brown, but that, to be fair, like I say, it looks fine. And the only other thing as well is you can't really have quarter markings on unless you let the coat grow back a bit. Right, so I use Lister Star clippers and I use A2 blades. I just find this leaves a much nicer finish. I have tried to use these cover coat blades in the past, which leaves the coat longer. However, I find it doesn't leave a very good finish with mine. I mean, I don't know why, but I just find it leaves marks, and it's just not as smart. So I use A2 blades, and I use this all year round, whether it be in the winter or the summer. And I tend to clip them probably like a week prior to the show, just so it leaves enough time. If I have got a few lines, it will have hopefully disguised itself by the time I go to the show. So he's clipped now. You can see his coat looks so much better. It really defines his features a lot more. So if you look at his legs, they're a lot more, like I say, defined rather than having all that clumpy hair on. His coat is also a lot shinier. You'll probably, when I bring him out of here, you'll notice it. But yes, he just looks so much better. And like I say, I do this probably like a week before I go to the show. I have done it the night before once when I was a bit OCD, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. A week's better, as it gives the coat a bit longer to grow in if needs be. So you can see I've left his whiskers on. For showing, you actually can still take them off, but that's the only, I don't know what the word is really, the only thing that you can keep, that you can take them off. So British dressage, British show jumping, British eventing, you have to keep their whiskers on, but for showing you don't. However, I do keep them on, A, because I do those other disciplines, but also, to me, it does actually seem right to keep them on. There's obviously been a lot of research gone into it, and I just think it's good to keep them on despite how long they are. The thing I do take out though are his ears. You can see how much more defined they are. He doesn't really prick his ears, but there you go. I do take all the hair out of there. Some people are against that, some people aren't, but I do think that makes a big difference to how they look. It really sharpens their face up and makes them look a lot more defined. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the mane. God, Alpha's a nightmare. He's the worst probably horse I could use for this. He's so fidgety. Anyway, ignore him. Right, so I'm going to talk about the mane because when I'm preparing for the show, obviously I've got to plait. So to plait, I need to have the mane the correct length and the correct thickness for how I like it. I always wash their manes before I think about pulling them because you'll be really surprised how much thinner their mane will feel once it's been washed. A really greasy mane can feel very thick, but but as soon as you wash it, it actually feels a lot thinner. And so I have washed this, and to be fair, it does feel thick, but it's probably the right thickness for what I'd like. However, it's still a bit long, so I'm not going to pull it the traditional method where you pull the hair out. I'm going to use it's called a stripping knife, and basically what that does, I just back comb up, and it shortens the mane, but still leaves a natural finish rather than a chopped scissor look. I forgot to mention that I also have a bridle path as well. Only a very small one. I used to be against these. I never had them because people tend to have huge ones down here which look horrendous, and it's always just a bit of a worry that they get bigger and bigger. However, I was getting a bit sick of trying to pull the forelock through and sorting out their mane when I was putting the bridle on it. It probably was less comfortable like that than having this. So I do put a very small bridle path in. It's probably about 2 fingers width, and I'm just very careful. So I try not to make it bigger, and it seems to do very well. And as you can see, it needs to be done again. And I just do that with a pair of handheld clippers, as that does a really nice neat finish. So this is a stripping knife, and basically I just comb the mane, and I like the mane to be about there. So I don't know how long that is. Yeah, I don't know, maybe a hand and a half. So I'll probably be taking about 1 inch off. And so I comb it through, make sure there's no knots, and then I simply just get a piece of mane, back comb it, and then just rake it off. And then that just leaves a nice natural finish. Just go all the way along, like that. That's that done, and as you can see, it still looks nice and natural, and it's lost no thickness, and it probably took me about 5 minutes to do. He was fine. Right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the tail and how I pull it. You can either have a plaited tail or a pulled tail for working hunters. However, I pull my horse's tails, and to be honest, the majority of people also do that. I pull my horse's tails the traditional way, so with my fingers and a comb, as I find this leaves a really nice finish. And I'd say my best advice would be to do it little and often. If you pull a horse's tail all at once, you're going to end up with it being quite bald and being quite bald, and that looks almost as worse as having a big bushy tail. And when it grows back, it's all going to grow back one length. So you want to try and do it little and often so that you've got stages of hair regrowth. That way it'll lie flatter, and you'll not have as much to pull out each time either. Always make sure that your horse is comfortable before standing behind it. I'm really lucky, all of my horses don't mind their tails being pulled at all. I probably wouldn't even need to tie them up. They're really not bothered. But if you haven't pulled your horse's tail before, then obviously either stand it behind a stable door or make sure you're out of harm's way, just in case they don't like it. Right, so I start with my fingers and I do the sides first. And it's really easy. I just get a little bit of hair and I just pull it out, basically. You just want to go all the way down. And you're not going any further. You're using the side as like your guide, if that makes sense. So you're not going to be pulling up here. You're just getting the underneath hairs and just pulling away like that. And like I say, this tail's probably not been pulled for 3 weeks, which is longer than where I'd normally leave it. I'd probably pull away at it like, I don't know, once a week maybe, and that way I've barely got any hair to pull out, but it just means it keeps it nice and neat all the time. But as you can see, this isn't so neat now. Then go on to the other side, like that. And then just constantly checking just to make sure I'm not taking too much out. I don't want any bald patches or anything like that. I want it just to look nice and smooth and covered. I don't like to see the bald skin. That's not a nice look, like I say. But if you do it regularly, you shouldn't get that, like I say, because you'll constantly have regrowth. If you look at the tail now, it doesn't look so much different from the top because I've not touched that yet. However, if you see the sides, you can see that I've thinned it all out under there. It's a little longer than what I'd like, but that's because it's been left for so long. However, by doing that, at least it means it isn't bald, like I say, but it's just stripped out a bit thinner. So now I'll move on to the top. And when I do the top, I use a comb rather than my fingers, as that leaves a bit extra length and blends it all in to the bottom. Right, so I get my comb and I comb the hair out to the sides, like this. And basically you want it to be like nice and smooth. So all the extra bits of hair, so all this length needs to go. So basically what I'm going to do is just back comb it and then pull it off. Back comb it, pull it off. And then can you see there, it's now in line basically with what you need. So, but when I comb it back over, it'll be a bit longer in the middle. So I do it like this. And just little pieces. Because again, we don't want to take too much out. Like that. And he's not bothered, like I say, but there you see now it's in line rather than having those long bits. And that's just how I get my length in the middle. Don't want it too short, don't want it too long. And then when I get further down, I want it maybe I do want it to hang over a little bit because it needs to blend into here. So I'll probably just take a little bit out. Right, so now I've done that side, I do exactly the same on the left hand side. See the difference? You've got all that long bit there, whereas this side, you don't really have that now. So we've got to sort all this. You just grab the hair that's hanging over, back comb it, pull it off, back comb it, pull it off. I'm quite lucky with Alf's tail, it's like quite a wiry tail, so the hair comes out really easily. Whereas there are some tails that are a bit more difficult to get the hair out. His is okay. Then we just keep combing to the side to make sure we're not leaving any bits behind. Like that. That's good. Done. Good boy. Good boy. And again, now we're getting lower down. We let it get a bit longer. Not too long, but just a little bit longer, like that. Right, so now we've done that, We then want to go at the middle bit, because this bit's just still a little bit long. So these bits are fine, these bits are fine, but we just want this just to take a little bit of the thickness out, basically. Not a lot, just enough. Just so it's a bit more thinned out. You just get little long pieces of there. When we're getting lower down, we want this longer, because if I pulled that really short, you're going to end up with like a really short bit and then the long bit. So really, I mean, that doesn't really need much out of it. I'd say probably just get that, and then I'm just, by getting the length, I'm just letting the hair run through my thumb. So basically it's getting longer here, it's shorter there, longer there, and then into that thing. And then that should be, and then you just keep looking, and if you see the long bits, or bits that look slightly thicker, you just go ahead and pull it out. But that should be your nice pulled tail. Now, you can see I've probably gone, I'd say halfway down as dot. I would suggest going either halfway or 3/4 of the way down. Depends how thick your horse's tail is. I don't like a thin tail, and for flat classes people use these fake tails, but for working hunters it's not really something I'd suggest, because when your horse is jumping, I suppose it's like extra weight behind. So I try to just leave their tail naturally thick, and as you can see with Alf's, his is lovely. Whereas if I pulled it another inch down, which would be like 3/4, like I'm taking out, probably end up taking out all of that. So I'd still be left with that, but like I say, I quite like it thicker, so I just go halfway down, and that's that. So all that needs now is a tail bandage. Finally, now we've pulled it, I'm just going to quickly talk about tail length. I like to have my horse's tails a hand below the hock, so it's short enough, but I just don't like a long tail. I find having long tails make them actually look a bit weak in their quarters. I don't know why, but it just makes them look longer, if that makes sense, and their quarters look weaker. So when I work it out by making sure they're not standing underneath themselves and not standing too far out, they're just standing nice and square, and I just run my hand down his hock, and then hand below, which is there, and then you just need to trim that little bit off. But that's how short I like my horse's tails. If you've got a high tail carriage, you might want to obviously leave it a bit longer, otherwise it'll be above his hock. But he doesn't, so like I say, I have a hand below, and that's that. Now he's been clipped, now he's had his mane and tail pulled, the next thing I'm going to do is bath him. And this is quite simple, to be honest. I have a hot shower, I'm lucky enough to have that, so I wet him, and then I just wash him with neat bright white shampoo from Lemieux. This is really good shampoo, it gets them very, very white. Gets rid of their stains, and I use it on all the horses. I just think it's a really great shampoo. So let's go. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the plaiting. For the working hunter classes I do, the horses have to be plaited. I plait the horses using thread, as I feel this gives a much nicer and professional finish than using bands. I mean, I also can't plait with bands, so that probably is one thing to do with it. But yeah, I plait with thread, and I use a technique where you don't actually see the thread, so it's invisible. You can have two techniques where you wrap the thread round, which makes the plait lie flatter, but I like to use the technique where you don't see the thread, as I think that leaves a nicer finish. So like I've said already, when turning a horse out and presenting it for the ring, you've got to think what is going to show your horse off the best, and potentially bring out its better qualities and maybe hide its not so good qualities. So for Alf, as perfect as he is, he is a little long in his back, which tends to make him look a bit shorter in his front. So what I do, I put more plaits in more plaits in, which basically gives the illusion that he has a longer neck. If you had a horse that had a really long neck, then you could put less plaits in, which would make it look shorter. Also, if you had a horse that potentially didn't have a very good top line, you could sit the plaits higher, which would give the illusion that it had a higher top line. Vice versa, if the horse had a bit of a cresty neck, you could do the plait technique that I said before, where you wrap the thread around, which makes the plait lie flatter, and that would make it not look so cresty. I comb the mane out, and then I use this plaiting spray from NAF. It's I don't dampen the mane. This is like a foamy thing, and it just makes the mane a bit like tacky. So it gives more security for when you're plaiting, rather than using water, and it just binds in those little like straggly hairs. So now I've done that, it's just a little damp. I then get my comb, I comb through, and then I measure out the desired width, which, like I said, is roughly like half a comb. Then I get my hair clip and take that to the side so it's out of the way. And we're going to split this into 3 even sections, like this. And we're just going to do the first 3 folds loosely, not too loose, but not too tight, just so it's comfortable on their neck. And then once we've done that, we can then plait it as tightly as possible, as this is then going to give a very secure plait. If you plait too loosely, it makes the plait quite loose and flimsy. So we want it nice and tight. And we're going to plait all the way to the bottom. See, since I've trimmed out mane now, it's the perfect length, it's not too long. And it's a nice thickness. So we fold it under like that, and then we're going to nip it in place so that it's secure. Then I'm going to get my thread. I'm not very well organised here, give me a minute. Oh God, hang on. Right, there we go, finally. Get my thread, and we're just going to put the needle up over, and then put the little knot there, and then we're going to just wrap it round once so it's nice and secure. We're still holding it tight. Excuse the dogs barking, God's sake. And then now it's secure because we've gone back through. So then we're going to go back down again, and then we're going to fold it. Some people roll it, but I fold it. So we're going to put the needle at the very top of the plait and fold the plait once, nipping it in place, and then again in the center of the plait, the needle back down. Like I say, this way you don't see the see the thread. If I'd wrapped it round, that's when you'd see it. So then we're going to put the needle back up at the bottom of the plait, and then put the needle back down like that, And then we're going to go back to the top of the plait, and that's our second fold. And that's what creates that plait. And then using our thumbs, we're just going to mold the plait in place like that. And then just a few times we're going to go up and down the center of the plait. And you can use any colored thread you like. I plait Alf's mane all with brown thread because, like I say, doing it this way, you don't actually see the thread. So even on the white bit, you don't see it. And then we always finish at the top so that, again, you don't see that little bit of thread at the bottom. So we get our scissors and then snip, and that's it. So now we're going to do the rest of it. So now the plaits are done. They look very nice, if I say so myself. I've got 15 plaits. I'd say that's probably the most you'd really want for a working hunter. Like there's 14 here and then 15 including the forelock. It averages, I'd say, between 12 and 15, but like I say, you don't really want more than 15. It wants to still have like that traditional look, and when you go hunting you obviously don't have millions of plaits in. But what you will see is that I've still got some straggly ends here. So all I'm going to do is just get that plaiting spray that I used and put quite a lot in my hand, and then just simply just flatten it down. And then once I've done this, I usually put a hood on, and then I will travel to the show in the hood. And then by the time I get to the show, everything's lying nice and flat. And that's that. Right, so moving on to the forelock, I do this when I get to the show, as it means it doesn't get rubbed out on the hay net and it's more comfortable for the horse. And what I basically do is a French plait, starting from the very top all the way down to the end. So basically I start with 3 pieces, and then each time I fold it over, but then I just add a little bit each time, keeping my 3 sections, and just constantly adding bits of hair from the side. You want to make sure it's nice and central, and don't add too thick a piece. You want it just to be small so that it's neat and not so clumpy. And just do this all the way to the end. Now we're going to do the finishing touches, so to speak. This is what we do at the show. I've got a glove on because we're going to be putting a little bit of makeup on him. Now, some people are against it again, some people aren't. I like just to put a teeny weeny bit on just to enhance his features. So if you look, he's got a black muzzle, and then he has a little bit of dark around his eyes, and we just want to make that just slightly darker, just so it stands out a bit more. But we don't want him to look like a panda. That's the last thing we want. So I'm going to show you what I use and what I do, but it's very minimal. Right, we're going to use a sponge and some black matte makeup. We're just going to put a little dollop on, just a smidge, like that. And then just get some baby oil. Now, we don't want to use this when it's hot, because obviously oil and heat don't go well together. So I'd only recommend using this on like a cooler day, and always make sure you wash it off after you've finished. So now I've got that. I always start at the muzzle because if I've got a little bit too much on the sponge, at least it means his eyes aren't going to be really dark. Whereas this bit, it doesn't matter so much because I can rub it off. So I'm just gently, ever so gently, just rubbing over his muzzle, like that. And that's literally like all I need. So doing the other side, doing exactly the same. Just a little bit, just to enhance those features. Like that. And now we're going to move on to his eyes, and we're all only going to do that little bit where it's dark. We don't want to be down here, don't want to be all around here. We just want teeny weeny little rub over his eye. Give that a bit of a rub, like that. Very subtle, barely anything on, but just enough, just to highlight it really. So if you look, you've got that eye there, and then that eye there. You can just see it just stands out just that little bit more. Maybe put a smidge more on, why not? There, perfect. So we've got that, and you can just see it just makes him stand out a bit more. So we'll do the other side. Rub that on, very subtle. And that's it. That's his makeup. Okay, so now we're going to move on to his body, and what I use is sparkle spray. That's literally all I use, but if you notice, he's actually come out in a bit of a rash, so I'm not going to spray it today because I don't want to irritate him, but I think this could possibly be from the clippers yesterday. So we're just going to leave his body today. However, like I say, I would use this sparkle spray, and I will put it in his mane. He hates sprays, so this will be interesting. There we go. A little bit in his mane, like that. And then I always put it in their tail too. And just give that a spray, like that. But like I say, normally I would do his whole body, but he's come out in this horrible rash. So I think I'd better just leave that today. Finally, just going to put the hoof oil on. Now I just use a natural hoof oil, like a dark one, but I really hate those like paint things, like when they paint their feet black. So I just use like a natural hoof oil like this. That way it doesn't actually dry out the hoof like some of those paints can do, and it still leaves a really nice finish. And I probably just let this sink in a bit, because if I'm on grass or in an arena, if I go straight onto it, it'll rub off. So I tend to just let it sit for a few minutes, and then that's it done. Right, so now we're going to talk about the tack that I use. So for working hunter classes, I use traditional hunter bridles. This is because, again, like working hunters meant to emulate like traditional like hunting in the past, and these are the types of bridles they'd use. So I use I don't have anything fancy, it's just, like I said, traditional hunting bridle. For the brow band though, I like to have a plaited brow band. That's probably as snazzy as it gets, and I just think that's like a really nice look. For the nose band, I tend to use either a cavesson, like what Alf has on here, or a grackle. I don't really use flash nose bands, as I find this part has to be really tight to stop it drooping down when you put your flash attachment on. So I like to just use a cavesson or a grackle, and I use the Mexican grackles that sit higher on their nose, because again, you're looking at your horse's features, and if you have a nose band that's sitting low, A, it's not going to be good for your horse's airways, but B, it's also going to make your horse look like it's got a long face, so you don't want that. So I like my nose bands to sit nice and central. Reins, I use leather reins with rubber coatings. These are brown, and again, I like to use these because I want to have grip for when I'm jumping. The last thing I want is the reins to slip out my hands, especially if it's raining. So I use that. The colour of my tack, I always use brown. I don't like using black tack, that's just my personal choice. And so yeah, that's what I use. And I always have a martingale on when I do my working hunters. I only ever use a running martingale. You can use standing martingales, but I've never needed to use one, or like I say, use them anyway. So I have a running martingale with a breastplate attachment, and again, I just think that really, it makes them look like a working hunter, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's that. So talking about the bit, in working hunter classes, that's probably like the one showing class you can use like an array of bits. The only two bits you can't use are a running gag and a hackamore. Any other bits you can use. So Alf here is wearing the Neues Schule universal bit with lozenge. He's always worn this. He likes it very much. But I'd say generally I tend to either use a snaffle or a pelham. And when I use a pelham, I use two reins. I never use D attachments. I don't even use them, so I don't even know their name. I always like to use two reins. I just think that looks nicer, and I quite like riding with two reins. So talking about the saddle, I use a jumping saddle. This is a Butte saddle. I really like it. It's a mono flap, so that's probably a bit more modern than the traditional like the traditional saddle you would wear. However, when you're jumping 1m20, 1m25, and I've got really long legs, I need to know I've got that security. So I use this saddle. I really like it. It's in the tan colour, which again I really quite like. It goes really well with chestnuts and grey horses, which I have, well, coloured greys, chestnuts, which I tend to have. And I use a stud girth because again I want to give my horse that extra protection for when they're jumping, especially Alf. He's really neat with his front legs if you look at his photos. So when he's got studs in, or even when he hasn't got studs in, I like to use a stud girth. Now the numner, this is from Lemieux. Oh, Alf, here's a horse. So this is from Lemieux, and this is half merino wool, and I quite like that for them. It's a nice traditional look, and it means it's not too clumpy, but it just looks quite nice and traditional. So that's what I use. Talking about the stirrups, again, this is another like a modern type of thing, I suppose. These are they're plastic safety stirrups, so they come away. And again, these are from Lemieux, and they've got a tread on them, so it just gives me a bit more security and also another safety aspect. So if I did fall off, God forbid, I like to think my feet will be free. So that's what I use. But you can use all sorts. These are black with a silver edge, but you can get them in silver, or you could have them completely black. Either's fine. Okay, so moving on to the boots, I use either tendon boots that Alf's got on now, they're from Lemieux, or I use brushing boots, and he also wears overreach boots. Now, some people don't wear overreach boots, but I actually, on Alf a few years ago, when I jumped my round, he had overreached and he came out and he had cut himself. So ever since then I wear overreach boots. You can't wear back boots, you can only wear front boots. And I quite like to wear black boots. That's probably the only black thing I have on the horses. I think it just looks nicer than the brown. I hope that was of some help to you, and if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to either send me a message or leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll try and answer them for you. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe, as that really helps. Thank you.